Now, I'm familiar with Karen Straughan. I haven't really listened to her in a bit. And I saw this link from Sergeant Willie Pete. And it was a video entitled, Why Donald Trump Deserves to Lose. I'm someone who identifies with men's rights. But I also understand that men's rights don't move. And one of the reasons why they don't move, it appears to be, is the advocates like Karen Straughan do not hold politicians accountable. Put like this, the video is gaslighting. And it's intellectually dishonest in a lot of areas. To the point where it's apologizing, and it's apologizing for someone whose base is men who didn't do anything for men's rights. In 4 years, I don't even think he made an argument for men's rights. He took men for granted the same way the Democratic Party can't afford to take black people for granted. And this men's rights activist apologizes for it through a passive-aggressive gaslighting video that is intellectually dishonest. So I'm just going to go through her words.
Okay. The man who spearheaded a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality and appointed America's first openly gay cabinet member is a homophobe.
Who's saying that Donald Trump is a homophobe? I don't, that is not, see, this reverse gaslighting, and this type of gaslighting coming from a men's rights activist is ironic, because this is the type of thing that a lot of dudes who get in bad relationships, it's kind of some punk shit coming from a man, but men will do it too, is they'll frame an argument in a way that makes alternative sound crazy. The argument against it sound crazy. But if you look at the big picture, it's a very weak argument. It's all in the framing, not in the totality. Donald Trump has been called a lot of things, and I'm sure he's been called a homophobe. But is he losing elections because of his homophobia? Is that even a top 20 reason? It's completely inane. And it's not going to, let's reverse it. Are you going to win elections because you appointed someone who was openly gay? Are you going to win elections by doing that against the Democratic Party for let's say you're someone who the main thing you care about is gay rights? Is that enough to move the needle for you? Is that going to make you go out and vote for Trump when you got openly gay people running for, well, that dude in Georgia wasn't openly gay, but I mean, you did have Buttigieg. You have gay marriage coming from the Democrats. So if you're all about LGBTQ rights, are you really going to jump ship to Republicans because Donald Trump does some things that are good for gay people? So I'm going to keep it playing.
The man who negotiated 4 historic peace agreements and managed to avoid having to go to war against a NATO ally is a warmonger.
So when is Trump really called a warmonger? Liberals, a lot of liberals voted green in 2016 because they saw Hillary Clinton as being the warmonger of the two. And her source is a post coming from Ro Khanna, who's pretty liberal congressman, saying that we need to bring the troops home. And he might have called Trump a warmonger in that because as someone who campaigned on bringing troops home, he didn't do it. He continued to complain about troops being deployed while he was president. He continued to tweet like he wasn't president. I mean, this is all in the frame because these are not things that lost him the election. Well, I'll get to the things that lost him the election.
The man who wants to bring troops home does not value the U.S. military.
Now, again, this is one of those bullshit arguments, and I admit, if I make a bullshit argument like this in a relationship, I have to come clean at another time. He's president. He can bring the troops home. Who gives a damn if he wants to, if he's not doing it? So that's not going to change an election. You're not going to feel better about Trump if all he does is say, I want to bring the troops home, but he doesn't do it.
The man who fixed the VA thinks people wounded or killed in war are losers and suckers.
That's based on a rumor that people who could have came out in the military, who could have came out and defended Trump, did not. So that rumor gets substantiated by the fact that you have people who are supposed to be in the room at the time when he said, hey, I'm not trying to go, I don't feel like going to honor fallen people who died in military. I think he was in Europe. They died in World War II. And then he flippantly said that, hey, if you die for this country, you're a sucker. Now, knowing Trump, it wouldn't surprise me if he said some shit like that, because this is a guy who mocked someone who was mentally handicapped. Especially if it's off the record. This is a guy who, off the record, says he knows that COVID is dangerous as hell, is going to kill 5 times the amount of people as a bad flu, but I'm still going to downplay it. So the dude says stupid shit. I don't necessarily think that that is a major reason why he lost. I've seen polls where people voted for Biden and they were asked why. I think I've heard one person in those polls say that that was a concern. Most people just think it's a smear. They don't think it's true. So if you're going to make a point about this, you need some evidence, and you're not going to get it, because evidence would have came from the people who were in the room. And that they're silent, to me, it's a lot easier to come out and say, hey, look, and he didn't say this, than it is to come out and say, yeah, the president said that. Because it could have been passing conversations. You don't think it's that big of a deal, so you're just going to stay out of it.
The man who increased funding for black colleges and universities and locked it in for 10 years hates black people.
Who really comes out there? See, being racist isn't so much I hate black people. Being racist is what he presented to black people, the Platinum Plan, and how his senior advisor, who's a young dude, Jared Kushner, followed it up with a bunch of racist comments. Being racist is not apologizing for the Central Park Five. Being racist is going to a rally and telling predominantly white women that we're not going to let people bring low-income housing to the suburbs, where you're just being a modern-day segregationalist. That's not going to beat Biden, who's an old-school segregationist. So that's not going to move anything. And the whole thing, funding HBCUs does not separate you from any other president. They've all done it. And it's not forward-thinking. It's not progressive, because obviously having HBCUs alone has not changed wealth inequality, racial wealth inequality, which is the root of all this racism. I mean, I could go on about how the dude showed up acting like Bull Connor and, Law and Order president, and was trying to get clearance through the military to use the military as security against the wishes of governors.
The man who created opportunity zones to revitalize distressed communities hates minorities.
Opportunity zones were done by Clinton, and they did not work for a whole bunch of reasons that if the dude cared to do research, let's be real. Donald Trump could have, the only way you get the black vote from the Democrats is if you do reparations. You have to do something major. You have to do something that moves the needle. You can't do something that Clinton did and Nixon did and act like that is somehow stupendous, that it's going to change. Otherwise, this is a mind game. This logic, like I've said, it's gaslighting. Like, this is gaslighting logic. This is the type of shit that starts domestic violence. When someone will just bullshit you just to be right in an argument, knowing damn well if had she done her homework, she would know how the Democratic Party got the black vote and how it was a major stroke in policy to end economic apartheid and punitive laws. Because crossing segregation for black people was punitive. That was a major thing. So you can't use logic as to why he deserved to lose in this framework of sarcasm, which I said, and I'll say again, is just a gaslighting technique. You can't use that unless you're talking about something that would have really helped him win, like reparations. And unless you know the history of what opportunity zones were, how they were implemented, and why they largely did not succeed in changing wealth inequality. And if you look at it, notice she said minorities. So already he's doing the same thing that we criticize Democrats for doing. He's saying, you know what, the big struggle is not minorities, because a lot of minorities come here, they already have loans set up. We're already picking some of the best of the best to integrate here from their countries. So minorities, by and large, I know Mexicans can catch some hell or whatever, but it's not a major minority problem. The human rights violations that you're rolling into minorities, almost all of them went to black people. So if you're going to be about justice, you would be focused on reparations for the human rights violations, not playing the same game that the Democratic Party is going to play. You cannot break a voting block by doing the same thing.
The man who champions school choice hates the poor.
School choice, a lot of times, depending on how they run it in a county, can at times funnel money away from public schools, which is what poor people can afford, to a charter school experiment. Some fail, some succeed. Instead of just doubling down and putting more money in the public school in poor neighborhoods. That's why you get that type of stigma if you're supporting charter schools in the way that he was. The quasi far right wing position on that is to try to cut corners to some degree, instead of just we got a rundown school, let's fund it properly. But again, that would be moving wealth from a different district.
The man who presided over the biggest 3-year increase in median household earnings in decades hates the middle class.
Now, I'm looking at her own graph, and it shows that this is basically with GDP. If you just go right back down, I should put a picture of this. This is all in trend with the 3 years before he got in office. It's all part of the rebound from 2008. And it's not what's going on now, because it all crashed. And it was teeter-tottering beforehand because the dude, Trump, he's not alone, other people do it, but I mean, for someone who always wants to call other people socialists, he was socializing the stock market. It reminds me of, you ever have like a game where you go off for a short period, but in total you still get your ass kicked? You can't really go back and say, but I had them going. I rocked them in the fourth round. Like, but you got beat up for the rest of the fight. Or started off great. And again, this is not what cost him the election at all. Matter of fact, most people were okay with the economy. They didn't like his response to COVID, but they were okay with the economy.
Class. The man who began closing the wealth gap is only in it for his own financial.
Her example is like 2017 through 2019. However, this is still, right now as we speak, you do not see wealth inequality in America like this unless you go back to the 20s. And the general direction of this has been since Reagan. It stuttered under Trump before, like I said, a general collapse. But it doesn't give any context. And again, this is one measure. And again, this is gaslighting, because has nothing to do with why Trump lost. Because really, people are savvier than that. They're going to say, okay, this is part of the trend that was happening under Obama in a gig economy with people delivering food all over the place and giving people Uber rides. So you have less unemployment until the collapse. But you also have stagnant wages.
The man who reduced our dependence on communist China and stood up for Hong Kong and Taiwan hates democracy.
This one's crazy. When you see his tax returns and how much money he owes China. But again, that's not why he lost. Nobody gives a damn about this. Like, him and Biden were arguing about that, and it didn't get any traction. Like, in the reviews of the debate, the fact that Trump doesn't get involved in that much stuff and when it comes to foreign entanglements, that's one of the few things that liberals like about him. It's one of the few things that conservatives like about him. The only people who really have an issue with that are neocons and neoliberals, and I'm, like the Heritage Foundation, I think part of, well, not really a Heritage Foundation, but the Lincoln Project. Maybe aspects of the Heritage Foundation. And like Pelosi level neoliberals. I'm not even talking about, like Young Turks. You don't have to be Nico House. Hillary Clinton and the Lincoln Project. That level of individual. Who was that fool that Trump hired and was talking about how Trump needs to do more to take out Iran and all that? Who was that dude? Bolton. He hired that fool Bolton. Had to fire him.
A man in American history whose net worth went down while he was president is a greedy fat cat.
How would you know that when his taxes just came out? So they're looking at Trump tumbles down Forbes 400. If you look at his taxes, he's been tumbling. He's in debt. And all that does is make him look like a fraud because you're not presenting the big picture, because you're gaslighting, Karen. This is why you had white women vote for Trump. I don't want to paint you with a big brush, Karen. But if you're a men's rights activist and you aren't naming one thing he did, have you mentioned anything he did for men's rights? Anything he did for men who are getting the wool brought to him? What I mean, the wool. We're just getting it brought to him in family court. Who's having trouble with custody battles. Who has that dime versus time dilemma when it comes to child support and seeing their kids. Parental alienation. Has he addressed any of that? All the things that you fight for, has he addressed any of that? I'm not hearing it.
The man who instituted prison reform and criminal justice reform is a racist sociopath.
When he first came into office, he overturned Obama's ruling to close private prisons. So, yes, he did. And this is a photo op with a black woman he got out of jail. So, yes, he did some things. Yes. Who else did? Joe Biden. Joe Biden undid the whole thing he did with crack and cocaine. So, here's an example where some black people couldn't vote for Biden. So he gained support with black people. So you're not being totally genuine. This did not hurt him. This helped him. He gained a little bit of black support, even though it looks kind of like a photo op, and he really wasn't much of a net positive, because the first thing he did was, we're going to maintain these private prisons. And he's against defunding police. Supposed to be a conservative, but just throw in more money. If they're not doing their job, so what? They're the police, they're good old boys, more money to them. Never taking a look at, hey, wait a second, should we have somebody shot up because they're having a nervous breakdown? Maybe we should have somebody else who's not a cop trained to kill help, not really accounting for that. So, top to bottom, he's mediocre, and he got a little bit of love. So if you want to give the big picture, there's not a whole lot of sarcasm or logic behind this. He did a little, he got a little.
The man who had a record number of small donations to his campaign and funded much of it with his own money is a Wall Street shill.
He's a Wall Street shill based on his tax code and the COVID stimulus and some of the people he hired and deregulations. Not necessarily about who funds him, even though he gets money from the very wealthy. And really, the difference is he just got way less money than Obama. Not that the people he was getting it from have that much less money.
The man who doesn't take a salary as president is not paying his fair share.
You're ignoring the fact that his tax returns just came out, which shows that he is not paying his fair share, or he's in debt, which means he's either broke and a fraud, or he's some kind of really skillful tax evader.
The man who made the RNC cheer after pledging to protect the safety of LGBTQ Americans is anti-queer.
This is an argument when you're trying to fill 3 minutes and you're doubling down on gays. You already did gays. The fact that he made some Republicans cheer when they're as sycophantic as they are is a no. That's a nothing argument, Karen.
The man who moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and whose daughter converted to Judaism so she could marry a Jewish man is a Nazi.
Being related to someone who dates someone doesn't mean anything. Let's be real. Jews are white. The only people who try to argue that Jews are somehow less than white are people who kind of got some Nazi-ish beliefs themselves. Trump was one of those people who tried to, I think he actually did pass some sort of presidential order. I'd have to look it up. But there is something where he tried to, or I don't know, let me look it up on the fly, because he tried to make it a racial group, Jewish racial minority, and let's see. Okay, yeah, Trump signs an order and provokes an identity crisis. Yeah, he's trying to make Judaism a race or a nationality, to define Judaism as a race or ethnicity. Who does that? These are white people. That right there is suspect. I'm pushing back on that. That's one of the reasons I did this video. I gotta do some pushback. That's not making sense, Karen. If you're gonna say a bunch of white people are actually a minority, and you're already trying to push minority-esque opportunity zones, you're how many white people wearing a goddamn yarmulke are going to get ownership of these opportunity zones? This like, had he done the opposite, had he came out and said, "Hey, look, these are white people," that would have been look. I already said what would have made me vote for Trump, as protests and as, hey, he's offering the best shit. But that would have made me respect the dude more than I do. Instead, he does the opposite, which is a big lie. So the fact that, his daughter's marrying a Jew, I don't care. They both white. And even if his daughter was marrying Wesley Snipes, I could give a damn. I go by, what are your policies? Now, I know other people, it's optics. But again, you're still making an argument of style over substance.
The man who followed the Constitution and allowed the states to generate their own coronavirus policy failed on coronavirus.
This is a dude that wanted to put the military in states where the governors were like, no. This is a dude who was not coming hard against these plots to kidnap a governor. No, this motherfucker didn't give a damn about a constitution. COVID was a national emergency. He could have gone to Congress. That isn't like, we end up getting a little $1,200 stimulus. And then he turns around and lies, blaming the state lockdowns that supposedly he's going to leave it up to them. But then he blames them on the economy failing, when it was really, like I did in another video, the economy was messed up before the lockdowns because of demand caused by the pandemic. So this is why he failed on COVID. He's lying to place blame outside. And this is what I mean. This is this fake sarcasm apology when this dude didn't even do anything for your main demographic that you advocate for, men. He didn't touch men's rights.
The man who presided over the single largest quarterly rise in GDP in history is destroying the economy.
I just explained how. Because, well, really, I didn't get into, had he done a UBI or just pumped a greater, longer lasting stimulus and did a quarantine, we'd have different COVID numbers. Now, people could have crossed the border and we could have had another uptick. But we would have had a period where we could have tasted normality and maybe gone back to it. Instead, we're the opposite. Quarterly GDP. You're already coming into a rebounding economy with all of the means and processes to help it rebound, and you have a fat quarter. That's like somebody, any sports game. I'll use a sports analogy again. You go off in a quarter, but you still lose. Well, something bad happened that was beyond my control. Okay, we get that. But if you're going to let that completely ruin everything and not really stay in the game, then no. And again, this is not why people didn't vote for him. We were okay. And I say I got issues, like little issues, but by and large, Americans, I think he gets reelected without COVID. So if you're going to make a sarcastic argument, you can't do it, because there's a whole bunch of things that aren't said.
The man who has tolerated the most unfair, dishonest, and negative media coverage in the history of this country, and yet made himself more available to the press and the people than any other president.
available. But the thing is, this is a dude that's constantly saying dumb stuff, getting caught in lies, serious lies. And even here, I'm like, okay, being available to, you're the president of the United States. That's your job, to be available to the media. You're supposed to be transparent. We can't have you in hiding. So it's so shallow what you're doing. You just want to say, oh, the media was harder on him than anybody. But he didn't strike back. He was constantly calling the media fake. That's why nobody is well, I won't say, some people are going to believe it right away. And I even think he might have a case. But there's a boy who cried wolf in this whole stolen election thing. Because it's always something. But he's supposed to be out there. Like, his press secretaries are supposed to tell the truth. What are you supposed to say if you're an editorialist and your president just lied about a pandemic? Blatantly saying that he'd rather, or he chooses to downplay it when he knows how deadly it is, because he doesn't want people to panic. But at the same time, he's always making it seem like we need to hurry up and build this wall because there's a caravan coming. But I don't want you to panic. That Antifa, bunch of stoner ass white boys who are a bigger threat than this pandemic that's killed 200,000 people. Hype up Antifa, and that's a fascist trait. Hype up violence and protests, but you don't want people to panic. Tell people that low-income housing is going to bring crime into their suburbs, but you don't want people to panic. So if I'm an editorialist, I'm going to call that out. They're supposed to call that out. You could sue the media for malpractice if they didn't call that out. And look at some of the stuff they would call out on Obama. The gray suit, the selfie. And I'm not even an Obama fan. In my last video, I called him a bitch. I said, Michelle Obama needs to check her bitch before she comes and check me. But let's be real, Obama, I'll even go into one of the things I didn't like, but it got overhyped and nobody fact checked it. I didn't like that Obama took out Gaddafi, but they weren't really pushing a slave market in Libya. I mean, all of those pictures are fake. It really does come down to one CNN article and I think one other testimony and a whole bunch of fake news on Obama that Obama gets blamed for. And again, this is something he did that I don't like, but it didn't cause a slave market in Libya.
Is a fascist.
Yes.
The man who told his supporters to vote in person so there'd be no cheating is trying to steal the election.
Oh, he said he said mail in your vote, and if they don't count it, vote in person. That's low-key telling people to vote twice, because the only reason why you would go to the polls after you already mailed it in is to, I guess, to check to see if they got it, but sometimes they don't get it till later. That's why I think if they were to do an audit, Biden might win by more. Trump would lose by more. And I'm not saying this is somebody who gives a damn about Biden. It's just, you have a lot of sheepish people to where if the president says, look, send in your ballot, and if they don't count ballot, and if they don't count it, go in and vote. Well, what if they didn't get it yet? Because a lot of places you can just put it in the same day. And now it's like, okay, I put it in, now I'll go to vote. They don't know that you haven't voted, so now you vote twice. And unless they audit it, then you get away with voting twice. I think that's how it works. Now, they might catch you and you might be in a world of trouble. You ain't supposed to do that. But I don't see how they would catch you, because that's how I voted. I sent in, I mailed in, right? Now, what if I would have mailed it in and it's dated, whatever, and then I go vote? I don't know how it works out. Would they have caught me? Would that have been a misdemeanor, or what, or felony? I mean, that's voting fraud, I would think. Or how do they catch you? I don't know how that works, but I know it's suspect for Trump to tell people to do that, because it would put them in a position where they don't know if they voted. Like, let's say they go to vote in person, they've already sent in a ballot. It seems like they might get in trouble if the system works, because now it's like they're voting again and, ooh, we caught you. Or we catch you when we're counting it after it comes in by mail. Because, I mean, you register to vote, so it has to be tied to something. And supposedly you can get a receipt for your vote. So it has to be tied to something. And again, Trump himself voted by mail. So how is it a feather in his cap if he's telling people to vote in person when he himself voted by mail? And people have been voting by mail for years. This is fluff to fill out 3 minutes. I think that's it, too.
The man who wants to take his case to court and let the court decide is a dictator.
Yes, when you're appointing the court justices and you want to go to court and have them decide instead of asking for recounts and audits. Yeah, that is dictatorish. Plus, he just fired 2 generals like he's trying to set up a coup. That is damn dictatorish. So you don't get a point for that. That's not even half good sarcasm. That's running out of material, Karen. And on that, it's done. Oh, welcome to Upside Down Land. It's just like, what? That is, Upside Down Land is just gaslighting speech. No, the world is right side up, Karen. You were just Samboing for Trump. I know you got a little African in your ethnicity. And that African is coming out for you Samboing for Trump like that. The world is not upside down. This dude had a horrible response to the pandemic, but for that, he probably would have won. Even with the horrible response, had he actually came hard with reparations, he probably, if he did it in time, would have broken the black voting bloc, and that would have made the difference in places like Milwaukee and Philly and Atlanta, Detroit. Would have made a big difference in the popular vote too. I think, because I think Trump was uniquely capable to argue for reparations in the same way that Hillary Clinton could have argued for men's rights and didn't. Which is why I think she lost. So I'll leave it at that.